questions answered. But that's a question mark. Mr. Kavanaugh has suggested that RFP responses could come back in 15 days. That's probably reasonable. Vendors are eager for business, and I would think that 15 days is a reasonable suggestion. Then multiple towns or boards have to award a contract. I'm no expert in how long it takes even our town to award a contract, but I know that it's going to take a little bit of time for multiple towns and school boards to award a contract. And, forgive me, but I just put 30 days into that. Given the way meetings work in different boards. To get a study completed, I think Brian allowed it 2.5 months in his proposal, and I think that's reasonable. The consultants will tell us whether they could do better or worse, but 2.5 months is fair. Then the next step is the hard one, frankly, and it's the wild card as far as I'm concerned. 3 school boards in 3 towns have to agree on a course of action, and then they have to apply to the county superintendent. I don't know how long that's going to take. I'm not making any predictions. I'm going to put optimistically in there 30 days. I think that's probably wildly optimistic, but I'll put the 30 days in. The county superintendent then has 60 days to issue an advisability report. I would expect, given the complexities we face, the county superintendent would likely take those 60 days. And then, after we get the advisability report, it gets a little easier here. Only 1 town is needed to apply to the state for a vote. They have to do that within 30 days. I would think if we have seen things in a study that make us believe that there's an option that makes sense to pursue, we could act pretty quickly on that. Certainly it wouldn't take us 30 days, but it's not going to take us 1 day either. I would just call that a wash. I'm not going to try to address that in the timing. After we apply to the state, the other towns have 15 days to answer what they call the petition. At that point, the state will conduct a hearing, and they have to issue a decision on whether we're allowed to vote within 60 days. Again, given the complexity of the issues, I think we're looking at 60 days. If I look at just the things that are under our control, I think I've got, and I'm going to do it now, I've got half a month, 2.5 months, that's 3 months. We've got 2 more months, that's, Brian, help me out. Up to 5 months, 60 days. We've got 15 days for the other town's petition, that's 5.5. And we've got 60 days for the state to answer, that's 7.5 months. Leaving aside the things that we can't control, which will add some amount of time, at least I think 2 months, as I've said optimistically, on the award of the bid and the time for the towns to come to consensus. So we're up to 8.5 months. The date on which we would have to file to have the issue on the ballot this November is August 16th. Even if we had started at the beginning of the year, it would have been nip and tuck as to whether we made the August 16th date. So look, I just want to set the expectations. We'll push this forward, but people shouldn't expect that it's going to be on the ballot in November.
Just to Mrs. Thomas, just answer one question specifically, just as predating Brian, if you go back to CVS and the effort that was made, and to Mr. Strobel's point about what's recorded, remember the meeting with Vito Gagliardi and the whole thing that was held in high school? That was also televised, and I think you could go back and get that whole timeline off that.
Okay, that's a good question. Okay, good. Thank you very much. I know someone had the answer. My other question, sorry.
No. When you're done, I was going to try and phrase an amendment so we can act on this.
I just have one more question. Steve, how much is a special election, so to speak, if we were to have a special?
You're probably looking somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 to $7,500. $5,000 to $7,500 for a special election.
Which maybe if all the towns thought it was worth it, we might be able to get them to help us. Okay, and as far as, I just want to say as far as the RFP is concerned, we don't have an RFP on here for consideration. And the reason being, I believe that most of the board is in concurrence with this, that in order to have an RFP and have it be a valid RFP that everyone can buy into, that has to be a collaborative effort that all the interested parties get to have a say in. So I think we're, once we get this going and everybody else is on board, I think we can run ahead with that as quickly as possible. That'll be the easy part. So because at the end of the day, we really all want the same thing. So, all right, so John, could you summarize for us where we stand with these modifications?
Yes, I think that Mr. Tolly's amendment might well read as follows, that upon adoption of a companion commitment by the constituent municipalities and constituent school districts, those shall be appropriated by the Township of Mendham, an amount of money not to exceed $10,000. The rest of paragraph 6, I think actually still remains viable. It provides actual release of funds shall be conditioned upon agreement by the constituent municipalities and constituent school districts by way of joint resolution or RFP, if you will. As to the consultant and final scope of work, this resolution should not preclude the use of private funding toward the committed funding. To the extent that outside funding is made available, it will be shared equally. So if that language is acceptable, it just says Mendham Township commits $10,000. We're looking for a general investment, if you will, in the process by the other partners, and that's where we stand.
Great, and so,
But I don't know if Mr. Tully agrees with what I
Sam,
put forward.
I would just take out not to exceed 10,000. I think we've only appropriated, in my mind, we've only agreed to spend 10,000. Doesn't mean that we couldn't agree to spend more, and actually no resolution can stop us from spending more in reality, because it's all, to me, the actual funding will be based on what is
The cost of the project.
the cost of the project.
Right, so take out not to exceed or leave it in?
Take out.
So,
Because it's factually correct to say we've committed 10,000, but we don't have no idea of, one, what the RFP would be, and what would be the other contributions from our municipalities. And we'd have to take that all into effect to come up to a final number.
so the Township Mendham would then commit $10,000.
Yeah.
Appropriate $10,000. Right, Mr. Strobel seconded that. If that's still a viable second to the amendment, then Ms. Thomas could call for a vote on the amendment, and then the entire resolution as amended.
So I need to second that amendment, is that what you're telling me? Yes, I'll second that amendment.
Mary Beth, a vote on the amendment, and then a vote on the resolution as amended.
any other changes before we go that far?
Good question.
No? All good?
You want any other comments,
Yeah,
or?
any other questions, comments? Good?
I think this just shows the effect that, you know, if we work positively together instead of going back and forth, we can accomplish something, and I would like to use this example of positive energy versus negative energy in the future.
All right, so before we call the vote, I have one final question. So is there anywhere in this language, or does this preclude us from having any flexibility of adjusting this or modifying this if any other towns simply aren't comfortable with the language that we've offered to them? And, you know, how would we work that out? I don't want to
You
go.
could always revisit it,
Okay.
like, for example, to increase the amount.
Increase
something.
the amount or any of the language,
Yeah.
you know, whether towns wants to change.
It's important I think we all recognize that on most of these, like anything else, the devil's in the details. The RFP, a sample of which I have from Mr. Kavanaugh, I have not shared with the rest of you, but that's where the rubber meets the road, you know. And so, yes, you have flexibility. You can, a motion to modify at some point in the future is certainly a viable option.
Awesome, okay, great. So we need a roll call on the amendment.
Mr. Bowden?
Yes.
Mr. Strobel?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes,
And Mr. Talley?
Yes.
Thank you.
and then we need a roll call on the new amended resolution.
Mr. Bowden?
Yes.
Mr. Strobel?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes,
And Mr. Talley?
Yes.
Thank you.
all right, that passes resolution 2013-66. On to resolution 2013-67, authorizing the payment of bills. Motion?
So moved.
Second?
And have you had a chance to review the bills,
I
Mr.
have
Talley?
reviewed the bills, the ones I've signed, and
All right, as have I, and so roll call, please.
Mr. Bowden?
Yes.
Mr. Strobel?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
And Mr. Talley?
Yes.
Thank you.
And resolution 2013-68, amending the 2013 budget insertion of special item of revenue. Steve?
Yes, we received notice after the budget